Well, good afternoon to you from Southern California, where we kick off our 30 Million Jobs tour for this country later this week. I am Dylan Ratigan. It's a pleasure to be seeing you. We'll talk about the John Huntsman news in just a moment, but our big story on this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday is the new math of racism in America. The greedy bastards have rebranded racism by calling it the war on drugs. They've made it both acceptable and profitable. While the concerns of racism from the 1950s and 60s have improved in this country, if you look at the numbers, the war on drugs has become a racist war. Blacks are 10 times as likely as whites to be incarcerated for the same drug crimes. There are more blacks in prison or on probation in America today, or parole, than there were enslaved in this country prior to the Civil War. But remember, this is greedy bastard-style racism. There's a profit to be made from the war on drugs and in keeping a huge number of folks in prison. Law enforcement agencies are allowed by federal law to use seized drug money to supplement their budgets, an appealing carrot at a time of municipal cutbacks. U.S. taxpayers, you and me, spent $74 billion with a B on prisons in 2007, with the biggest increase of our money going to for-profit prison companies. And yes, publicly traded for-profit prison companies exist. These companies have massive lobbying and political wings to keep the war on drugs alive, as they also happen to use the very prisoners that they put into our prisons as cheap labor. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in political donations to federal campaigns and millions of dollars to state elections and local politicians, not to mention millions more on lobbying dollars. Our generation's Civil Rights March is about getting money out of politics. And today, across the country, civil rights advocates are occupying all 13 Federal Reserve banks. They are calling it Occupy the Dream. We'll have more on that coming up. But we start with two leaders of today's movement. Civil rights leader Benjamin Chavis, CEO and co-chair of the Hip Hop Summit Action Network. He is also a former NAACP executive director, and he is the national director of the Million Man March. Also with us, Russell Simmons, chairman of Rush Communications and founder of GlobalGrind.com. Russell also co-authored with us today our Huffington Post blog. You can read it now. It is called Occupy the Dream, the Mathematics of Racism. And it's a privilege to welcome both of you. Russell, what has the response been?
Well, this has been an ongoing fight for me, as you may know, that Ben, in fact, was involved when we fought the Rockefeller drug laws, and we were very successful in making some shift in the laws in this state, and across the country. Actually, there's been other state governments that made big changes. But as you know, the worst of these laws across the country were the Rockefeller drug laws. And we had 100,000 kids, through the hip-hop community, and I guess we did get activists like Hillary Clinton at that time, and then became governor and helped us a great deal.
Cuomo.
Cuomo was a big part of it.
Patterson.
Governor Patterson, who actually made the final changes, and we fought and sparred with Governor Pataki, who actually made a change, and lots of people came home, but not significant enough change was made at that time, and then Patterson came along, we did more. But it's an ongoing fight all over this country. There are state laws and federal laws, as you know, that are influenced by lobbyists. Our biggest impediment, I have to add, because that's what this discussion is about, our biggest impediment in every state and on the federal level has been the lobbyists. And as you know, those prison industrial complexes have very strong lobbyists, and even more than any political ideals, it was the lobbyists and the money that kept these people in prison, that still keeps them languishing in prison, and that's the fight that we're discussing today. But the idea of Occupy the Dream, we believe, is the core of lots of the economic problems or inequality that we talk about, because when the money comes out of politics, then these politicians are free to work for the people, and no one wants to spend these billions of dollars. And I was shocked to see the numbers that they spent lobbying. I thought there was less money than they actually spending, because imagine how cheap it is. That little bit of lobbying money, that gets a lot of money for the politicians, but it has nothing to do with the kind of profit they make keeping people in jail. So anyway, that's my estimation of where we are and what we're trying to do.
Ben, if you look at the numbers, again, black incarceration rate 10 times as likely as white, same drug crime. Black men, 40% of the prison population, but only 14% of the U.S. population.
Yes.
The lobbying numbers, $836,000. Who knows such a little money could get you so much action, huh? To federal candidates, $6 million to state politicians. How broadly understood do you think the connection between both the incarceration rates and the financial interests of the prison industrial complex funding our politicians, how well understood do you believe these connections are today?
Well, thank you, Darling. The good news is I think there's a growing awareness, there's a growing understanding of the connection, the nexus between too much money in politics controlling the corruption of our democracy. That's why we need a constitutional amendment. But I'm so pleased to tell you on this day, on Martin Luther King Day, Occupy the Dream, there's a growing movement. We're planting good seeds in New York, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Washington, D.C., in Philadelphia, in St. Louis, in Kansas City, in Minneapolis. We were in over 20 cities today. And right now, I just got a text from Chicago. They're just beginning outside the Federal Reserve Bank. The clip you saw earlier at the beginning of the show was from the Federal Reserve Bank here in New York. We had a good crowd. And I'm so pleased that not only black people and Latino people and white people and Asian and Native American, it's truly a multiracial dynamic that's happening across lines. I think Dr. King would be so pleased to see people supporting and recognizing his birthday in an active way. We need to challenge income inequality, economic injustice. And so if we want to get, I like what you wrote today in terms of Occupy the Dream, the mathematics of racism, the economics of racism, the politics of racism. But also it's just not, when we talk about racism, sometimes you think that only black people are involved. All people are involved when we need to get this money out of our system. And that's why Occupy the Dream fundamentally supports a constitutional amendment, Dallin, to ban all this corporate money out of politics today. We got to rescue our democracy. We got to reset things. And I'm looking forward. This is just the first day. There was a curtain riser today at all of the Federal Reserve banks. And I'm rolling my sleeves. My man Russell Simmons is giving me the authorization. I'm on it, man.
Russell, Ben, I worked with Ben. Let me just say this about Ben. Ben is was the organizer of the Million Man March, and to work with these church guys again, I guess it must be a pleasure for him. But these are this is the nucleus. These guys have worked. A number of the people on the conference call yesterday worked with Dr. King, and it's exciting to see them going back to work and roll up their sleeves. And I think it was King's dream to have the civil rights community and work with the unions and to have young, creative energy like we have through Occupy Wall Street. It was his dream to have them all march together for economic justice. And so this is exciting for not only for Ben, obviously, but for me. It's my first bout, but Ben has been in a number of them, and I'm excited to do this work.
Well, as I said last night at the Riverside Church, I'm sort of the OG in this, and I'm so pleased to see young ministers like Reverend Dr. Jamal Bryant at the Empowerment Temple down there in Baltimore. You should have seen him today in Washington, D.C. at the Federal Reserve. All of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Zion, the CME Church, the National Baptist Convention, the Progressive National Baptist Convention, Dr. King's denomination.
But you also have Reverend Jackson.
Reverend Jesse Jackson is outside the Federal Reserve right now while the program is on in Chicago.
And Reverend Sharpton's of support.
Reverend Sharpton's
and NAACP.
NAACP, all of our civil rights organizations, SCLC, everybody's involved with Occupy the Dream. So, Dylan, I'm so glad you wrote that article, and you and Russell, because it points to these statistics.
One example.
Yes, but we got to do something about it.
Why are the jobs overseas?
Absolutely.
Why don't we have health care?
Got that money.
Americans, what I think Occupy the Dream can do is educate the public. I don't think sitting politicians are happy to change anything. Even if I speak to a very powerful progressive senator, I say to him about Occupy the Dream and its intention. He said, oh, it's a good idea, but it'll never happen. The fact is, it's going to be difficult to move any Democrat or Republican. This is not a Democrat or Republican initiative either. It's not a Tea Party initiative, or it's not a progressive or a conservative initiative. This is an American. This is a 90-10 issue. 9 out of 10 Americans believe, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. I feel like I'm so used to being on these conservative shows or shows that don't understand this phenomenon, because this speaks to everyone. 9 out of 10 Americans believe that there's too much special interest money in our politics. And when this constitutional amendment promotes public funding, so there's no more expenditures like the super PACs that are hijacking this election in front of our faces. It seems to me that it's obvious, and we just have to push it into the consciousness of the people. And when we do that, they're going to force the politicians to do what's right.
Yeah. I'm going to leave it on that note and say what a privilege it is to not only be able to host the two of you, but to thank both of you for your leadership as multiple groups are all finding each other around this singular issue.
That's right.
That speaks to the issue of justice in the American way, not a particular political agenda. So I look forward to future work with both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the work that you've been doing. You're a great inspiration to many people in this movement, and we're going to put them all together. Like we mentioned some civil rights groups, but there are many groups who are dedicated to this single issue, as you said, and I'm excited that they're coming together to push for this big American revolution.
Thank you. It's amazing. Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you sooner rather than later.